And then Joseph came and told Pharaoh and said, my father and my brethren and their flocks and their herds and all that they have are come out of the land of Canaan, and behold, they are in the land of Goshen. Where on earth is that? Well, if you look at the Nile River flows north. Not too many rivers flow north in the northern hemisphere, but this one does. When they talk about upper and lower Egypt, it's a little confusing to us Americans because we always think of upper as north and lower as south. They think of it as elevation, okay? So this is lower Egypt, closer to the water, and this is upper Egypt. So we would think, they don't think about from a map. They don't have a map, I guess. They didn't care. But they called it upper and lower. Who cares? I just lost interest. Anyway, this Nile River comes up and it spreads out and forms a large delta. Like New Orleans is built on a delta there of the Mississippi River. So the land of Goshen is very, very fertile land. It's all sediments from who knows where, Ethiopia and other places down there, or whatever washes into the Nile. So even to this day, they call it Goshen, this part of modern map of Cairo, and of Egypt, I mean. So the big delta, deltoid-shaped sediments out here, very, very fertile land. He said, we want to live in the land of Goshen. Now, it's interesting. This would be not only the great fertile land for their sheep and cows and horses and stuff, that's the closest to Israel when they finally get out of here. If they were on this side, and Pharaoh said you can go, they'd have to walk all the way through town, a bunch of towns, and might better just at midnight just kind of be gone, you know. They're already closer to where they want to go home. Okay. And he took some of his brethren, even 5 men, and presented them unto Pharaoh. And Pharaoh said unto his brethren, what is your occupation? And they said unto Pharaoh, thy servants are shepherds, both we and also our fathers. They said moreover unto Pharaoh, for to sojourn in the land are we come, for thy servants have no pasture for their flocks, for the famine is sore in the land of Canaan. The grass is all dried up. Sheep got nothing to eat. Now therefore we pray thee, let thy servants dwell in the land of Goshen, where there's lots of sheep, lots of grass. And Pharaoh spake unto Joseph, saying, thy father and thy brethren are come unto thee, the land of Egypt is before thee. In the best of the land make thy father and brethren to dwell, in the land of Goshen let them dwell. And if thou knowest any men of activity among them, any hard workers, make them rulers over my cattle. If you got somebody who's really good with sheep and cows and horses, put them in charge of ours, so they can take care of ours too. Like you guys take care of the goats and the chickens here. I don't know anything about that and don't want to learn. I just want to eat the eggs in the morning, and thank you, Lady Di, for fixing them. And Joseph brought in Jacob, his father, and set him before Pharaoh, and Jacob blessed Pharaoh. Now this is interesting. Jacob blessed Pharaoh. Pharaoh's the king of the probably wealthiest land on earth at the time. The Bible says in Hebrews 7:7, and without all controversy, the less is blessed of the better. It's usually the person who's higher in rank in the military or more important politically or of more spiritual, and the pastor would bless the people. The less is blessed of the better. But here we have Jacob blessing Pharaoh. Jacob is actually higher in status, okay? So that's Hebrews 7:7. And Pharaoh said unto Jacob, how old are you? How old art thou? And Jacob said to Pharaoh, the days of the years of my pilgrimage are 130 years. Few and evil have the days of the years of my life been. Well, duh, Jacob, you brought most of that on yourself, okay? You tricked everybody else all your life, and sure enough, they came back and tricked you a bunch of times. Married the wrong wife, and all this kind of stuff. He said, and have not attained unto the days of the years of the life of my fathers. What is this? He said, hey, Pharaoh, I'm 130. But this is nothing compared to my fathers. What's he talking about here? Well, if you look at our timeline, I got one right here. We've changed the color code a couple of times, but you can buy these, 6 of them for $30 and use them for placemats, laminated. Adam lived to be 130, according to the Bible, Genesis chapter 5. All these people before the big flood came are living to be nearly 900 years old. Average age 912. After the flood, it drops off to 400 for a couple generations, and then it drops off to 200. Then we get down here to Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, the story we've been reading the last few months. So Jacob is talking to Pharaoh. He says, I'm 130, but this is nothing compared to my ancestors. Do you realize Jacob could have personally known Eber, which is where the word Hebrew comes from, Eber. He was 460 some. Jacob probably, he could have met Shem. Noah's son, Shem, lived long enough to meet Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. You'll never catch that just reading the Bible, but when you graph it out, it's like, whoa. So if you're 130, but you know a 600-year-old living down the street, you just don't feel so old anymore, okay? And Jacob blessed Pharaoh again and went out from before Pharaoh. So here's this old man, 130 years old, meeting Pharaoh, and he blessed him. And Joseph placed his father and his brethren and gave them a possession in the land of Egypt, in the best of the land, in the land of Ramses, as Pharaoh had commanded. Keep in mind, Pharaoh is extremely grateful to Joseph because he saved his whole nation from starving. He's very grateful. There's a place in Bloomington, Illinois, on the southwest side of Bloomington, middle of a cornfield. There's a place called the Funk, F-U-N-K, Funk Gem and Mineral Museum. Mr. Funk, years and years ago, developed varieties of corn that produce much more than normal. You see all over signs all over Illinois, to this day, all over the Corn Belt, Funk corn, F-U-N-K, just Google it, okay? There's a museum there, it's incredible, full of rocks and minerals. Mr. Funk took his seed corn to other countries and brought them seed, special seed that would grow like crazy, grow faster, produce more, grow in dry land, grow in wet land, okay, varieties of corn that would survive. And he took it like to India and I think China and other countries, and he saved probably millions of lives from starving. So the presidents and leaders of those countries were so grateful, they would send him really amazing, cool crystals and rocks and stuff because they knew he collected that stuff. And the Funk, I mean, it's in the middle of a cornfield, Bloomington, Illinois. Blow your mind. He's got one wall. You walk in, the whole wall is covered with thin slices of quartz and beautiful rock. Then they flip a light on behind it, and the whole thing glows with every color you can imagine. If you're ever going up near Bloomington, that's where I got saved, in Bloomington. Okay, anyway, so Pharaoh's grateful to Joseph because he saved their lives. And Joseph nourished his father and his brethren and all his father's household. Hovind translation. They all went on welfare. Pharaoh's going to take care of them with bread according to their families, and that for there was no bread in all the land, for the famine was very sore, so that the land of Egypt and all the land of Canaan fainted by reason of the famine. And Joseph gathered up all the money that was found in the land of Egypt. When bad times happen, the government gets rich. Isn't that strange? He gathered up all the money in the land of Canaan for the corn which they bought. And Joseph brought the money into Pharaoh's house. Who profits from a crisis? The government. Yeah, that's Stalin and Hegelian dialectic and the Communism 101. You create a crisis and then you bring in your solution to the crisis.
Is FEMA part of the government too?
Yeah, FEMA and all that stuff, Federal Emergency Management. And when money failed in the land of Egypt and in the land of Canaan, all the Egyptians came unto Joseph and said, Give us bread, for why should we die in thy presence? For the money faileth. Hey, we're broke, but we're still hungry. And Joseph said, Give your cattle, and I will give you for your cattle if money fails. You don't have any money, I'll take your cows and sheep and horses. And they brought their cattle unto Joseph, and Joseph gave them bread in exchange for horses, and for their flocks, and for the cattle of the herds, and for the asses. And he fed them with bread for all their cattle for that year. When that year was ended, they came unto him the second year, and said unto him, We will not hide it from my lord, how that our money is spent. My lord also hath our herds of cattle. There is not aught left in the sight of my lord, but our bodies and our lands. Wherefore should we die before thine eyes, both we and our land? Buy us and our land for bread, and we and our land will be servants unto Pharaoh. And give us seed that we may live and not die, and the land be not desolate. When people get hungry, they will give up everything they have. They'll become a slave just to get fed. That's coming again. Mark my words, tonight, November 10th, 2017. We're going to see this happen in America. They're going to say, Oh, you don't have anything? Come on in, take this mark in your right hand or in your forehead, and we'll feed you. You don't take the mark? Sorry, no food. People do strange things when food's involved, when they don't have any. And Joseph bought all the land of Egypt for Pharaoh, for the Egyptians sold every man his field because the famine prevailed over them, so the land became Pharaoh's. Who profits from a crisis? Pharaoh. Yes, sir. Now, during normal years, let's just take a scenario. Let's say the people made $10,000 a year. The average Egyptian, let's just pick a number, they made $10,000 a year. They had plenty of years. For 7 years, things were going great. Remember, they had good times. Let's just pick a number and say they were making $15,000 a year. So for 7 years, everybody's making $15,000 a year. They're all feeling, whoa, this is going great. Pharaoh took 20%, right? That would be $3,000. They lived off $12,000. Even paying 20% to Pharaoh, they still were better off than normal. They could have and should have saved another 20%. They could have saved $3,000 for themselves, because Pharaoh took $3,000. They could have saved another $3,000 and lived off $9,000. Things were going great. They should have tightened their belt when things were going great and saved their own corn. They didn't do it. During the bad years, Pharaoh fed them from the $3,000 he collected. So their income went from $10,000 a year to $3,000 a year for 7 years. Had they simply, during the good years, saved up, they would not have had to sell their cows and lands and everything to Pharaoh. So when things are going really good and everything's great, bad times are coming. Just relax. They'll be here. They come to everybody. If you just look at a simple math equation like that, they did this to themselves by not thinking ahead. The Bible says, a prudent man foreseeth the evil and hideth himself. But the simple pass on and are punished. One man walked into a bar. Bang. The next man ducked, okay? When you see somebody walk into a bar, duck, and don't you walk into the bar. You should see what people do and say, don't do that, okay? And so verse 21, and as for the people, he removed them to cities. Once the government takes over and you become a slave, they're going to tell you where to live and what to do. They're going to move everybody into housing complexes. There are already gigantic FEMA camps set up all over America, ready to house people. What's that?
They're in Walmarts.
And abandoned Walmarts.
Yes, over 500 there.
They're already ready for the crisis. They're creating the crisis themselves and then going to solve it. Everybody come here and you stay in this room and we'll feed you if you behave and do what we want until we're done with you and want to, exterminate you. Only the land of the priests bought he not. For the priests had a portion assigned them of Pharaoh. It's interesting. The American government got some of this concept that churches should be tax exempt from this concept. Oh, that we need the Christian influence. We need the religious influence to help people of our country do right. And so churches all through American history have been they're not tax exempt, a tax exception. There's a big difference between an exemption and an exception. If I asked you, Nick, are you exempt from Mexican taxes? Well, you're not in Mexico. You're not a Mexican. In order to be exempt from something, you first have to be under that authority. And they let you come out of their authority. I'm not exempt from Swiss taxes. I'm not Swiss. So churches are not tax exempt. They're tax exceptions. They're supposed to be, which is what Internal Revenue Code 508 codifies, not 501c3. Anyway, so the priests had a portion assigned them of Pharaoh, and did eat their portion which Pharaoh gave them, wherefore they sold not their lands. Then Joseph said unto the people, Behold, I have bought you this day and your land for Pharaoh. Lo, here is seed for you, and ye shall sow the land. And it shall come to pass in the increase that ye shall give the fifth part unto Pharaoh. Joseph made a rule, from now on 20%, you pay 20% taxes. You harvest your stuff, 20% of the increase. So if I give you 20 bushels to plant, and you get 120 bushels back, you give 20% of the 100, not the 120. The Bible method is today for Christians to tithe off their increase. So if you make $400 a month, or $400 a week in your paycheck, but you have to drive back and forth to work, you could get picky with God, I suppose, and say, look, it cost me $50 to make that $400. So I'm tithing off the $350 if you want to get picky with God. And 4 parts, that's 80%, shall be your own for seed of the field, and for your food, and for them of your households, and for food for your little ones. So now, here they are, complete slaves, paying 20%. What's tax rate in Switzerland?
VAT 8%.
Total taxes that you pay to the go.
It's about 1.5 months. wage. So 1.5 months.
out of 12. So about, say, that would be what, 12, 15%. Okay.
Yeah.
Average American is what, 30, 40%?
Pretty low.
35?
Yeah, we've got a lot of
The slaves in Egypt were better off. Yeah, they only paid 20%. Free Americans paying 35%. Think about that for a few minutes. Okay. Did I finish that? Yeah, okay. And they said, Thou hast saved our lives. Let us find grace in thy sight, and my Lord, in the sight of my Lord, and we will be Pharaoh's servants. And Joseph made it a law over the land of Egypt unto this day that Pharaoh should have the fifth part, 20%, except the land of the priests only, which became not Pharaoh's. And Israel dwelt in the land of Egypt, in the country of Goshen. And they had possessions there, and grew and multiplied exceedingly. And Jacob lived in the land of Egypt 17 years. Now hold on just a minute. How many years of famine were there going to be? Remember that dream he had? 7. He moved down there the second year of the famine. So 5 years later, the famine was over. But he stayed there 17 years. Now, after Pharaoh died and Joseph died, the new Pharaoh made slaves out of all these people. Right? And a couple hundred years later, Moses leads them out. There's 2 million of them he leads out now. But Jacob could have left when the famine ended and gone back home. But he kind of got used to living on welfare. Let's just stay right here. I think it's pretty nice here. Stayed there 17 years. Should have stayed 5 and gone home. Get back to work. No, he don't want to go to work. I like that check coming in every month. So the whole age of Jacob was 147 years. And the time drew nigh that Israel must die. Remember, Israel and Jacob, same guy. And he called his son Joseph and said unto him, If now I found grace in thy sight, put, I pray thee, thy hand under my thigh. We talked about that earlier. That's how they made a promise. Instead of, put your hand over your heart and make a promise, or put your hand on the Bible, or they just put your hand under my thigh. That's what they did. Okay. He said, And deal kindly and truly with me. Bury me not, I pray thee, in Egypt. I don't want to be buried down here. Oh, so you'll stay there and live on their welfare for 17 years, but you don't want to be buried there. I see. Okay. But I will lie with my fathers, and thou shalt carry me out of Egypt and bury me in their burying place. Remember up in Hebron where Abraham was buried, and Sarah and Isaac. And he said, I will do as thou hast said. And he said, Swear unto me. And he sware unto him, and Israel bowed himself upon the bed's head. So we'll see in the next chapter, chapter 48, he dies.